I rise to speak in regard to this estimates report, particularly in regard to infrastructure and how vital it is in all corners of this state. What we have seen, though, in the estimates process has been a lack of clarity about what the real infrastructure pipeline is, and the feedback I'm currently getting from the construction industry, particularly civil construction, has been that they are really looking for a clear, transparent pipeline for infrastructure projects, and it is not all in QTRIP. It does not actually outline the projects that they're asking to see the detail of. And quite clearly, if that's the best the minister can do, no wonder we've got engineering firms only in the last week or two announcing a number of redundancies. And that's a major concern, because at a time when we need to capture this level of expertise to help the infrastructure delivery of small, medium and larger projects throughout this state, there is a lack of confidence in some parts of the industry. We need to have a diversity of contractors and suppliers, not just the big tier guys who can go and use their might of their position to subcontract others and not build up the capacity of Australian-owned businesses in that infrastructure pipeline. We must have greater transparency and, quite frankly, greater investment in those small, medium and large projects throughout those range of contractors to deliver into the regions. We've already seen concern expressed that it was only a few years ago this state Labor government announced with great fanfare Building Queensland, a statutory authority. And according to that former Deputy Premier, Jackie Trad, haven't heard her name mentioned lately, and I quote from the article, Queensland releases Independent Infrastructure Pipeline Report in July 2016, and it goes on to quote that former Deputy Premier who was in charge of the infrastructure delivery and some other interesting infrastructure in her own backyard. Anyway, but the premise of Building Queensland as a statutory authority was that it was going to take the politics out of infrastructure delivery and assessing the priority projects. And I will table this article, but I'll quote firstly where it says, as an independent organisation, Building Queensland is able to provide our government with impartial and expert advice on where we should invest the state's infrastructure funds, Ms Trad said. For the first time, our state now has a clear pipeline of infrastructure projects which have been independently assessed and prioritised based on returns to local communities and state's economy. And the article goes on, and I'll table that, but I reference that because then mysteriously, only a few years after that Deputy Premier was in charge of infrastructure, the Palaszczuk Labor government got rid of they say they're not getting rid of Building Queensland, they're just morphing it into the department. So when I said they're getting rid of Building Queensland, no, that's not correct. That's an imputation. They're undoing the statutory authority and putting it back under the department. So I think that actually is getting rid of the statutory authority. We're yet to see that legislation come through the House and be passed. But the point is this. It was only a few years ago this government said they were doing it for transparency and independence and taking the expert advice to deliver an infrastructure pipeline. And then a few years later, they're getting rid of it. How about that? What's that say? It says that they can't get their stories straight, for one thing, but industry is saying they are most concerned at a time in the rebuild out of COVID and the impacts when infrastructure is vitally important to the construction industry and the jobs in the regions, and also important to the ongoing economic prosperity of the various regions. There is a lack of a real infrastructure pipeline. And yet we're seeing other states outgunning Queensland. Queensland has racked up the debt but not put it all back into substantial pipeline of those small, medium, large-size infrastructure projects. Lost opportunity at a time when the way to build Australian-owned businesses and delivering the infrastructure, the roads, The water, my word. We know that they're not doing many water projects in this state. If you want to really get Queensland going, I know my colleague, the member for Nanango, will talk about that.
Members' time has expired. I call the Minister for Agriculture.